Alright boys, I got this build video for you, and this one's going to be specific to the Titan class and to Dunemarchers. Now if you don't like Dunemarchers, alright then click away. But you might want to watch this, because this is what it allows you to do.
I could not ask for a better victory.
Do I have your attention now? That's some voodoo shit. So now that I got your attention, as you just saw me, death from above, one hit melee, two different opponents, let's talk about it. First up, I would like to mention we will be continuing these type of build videos for all classes, but given the fact that Forsaken has brought a lot of different exotics as well as new subclasses, and overall Sandbox is just frankly a lot different, I'm arriving at somewhere between 35 and 45 different builds in this game. There is so many different builds that I'm kind of going out of my mind. Today we're going to be going over 4 of them. Now for those that don't know what Dunemarchers are, they grant you the exotic perk Linear Actuators. It increases sprint speed, but as you sprint, you build up static charge. And when you melee an enemy, that static charge discharges amongst a large group of enemies. Whether they're standing together or not, there's like a 2 to 3 second response in which the static charge will be hugging the nuts of your enemy and then disperse as soon as another enemy comes within contact of them. So it's a very good perk, outside of the fact that it also gives you increased sprint speed. So let's talk about build number 1. This build is similar to what we've always used, a simple shoulder charge. I reviewed Dunemarchers not too long ago in patch 1.2.3. Nothing has changed here in terms of damage. The static discharge still allows for that 85 extra damage in terms of AoE. Really nice, guys, but not really needed anymore. We needed linear actuators and Dunemarchers in the previous sandbox to get the one-hit KO with the shoulder charge. Now you can just one-hit KO shoulder charge people all day long. So linear actuators is just fluffer here. It allows you to just get some extra AoE damage out, but not needed. Now build number 2. This one was very interesting to me. It is Dunemarcher stacked with the new Sentinel subclass, Code of the Commander. Now, Code of the Commander has 3 different perks here that are going to synergize with the damage output of linear actuators. Controlled Demolition. You hit a target with a void ability to attach a void detonator. Tactical Strike. Strike an enemy with his melee ability to cause a void explosion. Resupply. You and nearby allies regain health, as well as grenade and melee energy when your void detonators explode. Now let us observe these clips, as I am almost as confused as you are. I am trying to figure out what the flowchart is here. As you see, I am applying my melee, which instantly makes my opponent explode. As soon as he explodes, he attaches void detonators to the opponents around him. They will also explode, because despite getting void detonators now attached to them, which wouldn't kill them, it's just void detonators and some slight damage that they receive from the initial explosion from your melee, linear actuators is actually what finishes them off. Upon finishing them off with linear actuators, they then explode. But now again, let's look at that perk one more time. Further hits after attaching a void detonator will cause the detonator to explode. So it doesn't mean a kill to actually activate that detonator, just further hits, which is where linear actuators comes in. You see, you can run in there and just melee opponents, it'll attach detonators, but it won't actually kill any of them outside of the one that you directly hit. Linear actuators might not kill them, but it might tickle them just enough to where it sets those detonators off. And again, in the midst of those detonators being set off, you activate resupply, you get your grenade and melee energy coming back to you. Maybe not all of it, but some of it. And linear actuators is not a hard perk to activate. You just have to sprint for a few more seconds. There's not a cooldown. So the synergy here, guys, is really good. Specifically here in PvE. You can use it in PvP. I find that there's other melees a lot better though for PvP. But for PvE, and you just want to clear mobs of enemies, this is a very fun and explosive option to use. Next up is our 3rd build, and nothing really crazy happening in this build. But essentially, guys, you're going to be pairing Dunemarchers with the new Sunbreaker class. That's right, boys. You're going to be a Thor wannabe. You're going to throw your hammer into the midst of enemies. It will do its initial damage, and then proceed to do its chain damage from linear actuators. Okay, so the reason why I'm including this as a build, the perk Roaring Flames is a very good perk for this class, but the only thing that I really like about it, essentially, guys, kills with your solar abilities increase those abilities damage, and it can stack up to 3 times, last upwards of like 15 seconds. So you run up into a mob of enemies, you start throwing your hammer. Now unfortunately, linear actuator kills does not activate Roaring Flames. It's actually your hammer kill that will activate it. I was hoping it was gonna like bug out and like allow me to like wipe a group of enemies with linear actuators, but it counts as hammer kills. So boom, I've got 3 stacks. It didn't work, boys. But what it will allow you to do is essentially get linear actuator damage into enemies over and over again, and you could just pick your throwing hammer up. So like the way I look at it is I don't necessarily hit the first major I see. I go in there to a group of enemies. I've got linear actuators together. I hit the first trash ad that I see. I've now got a stack of roaring flames times 1. I pick up my hammer. I proceed to the next target, and eventually you'll be able to sit there and just one-hit melee majors with your hammer. I mean, just in this lost sector right here, I was hitting this ogre for like 3,500 damage with 1 melee hit. Linear actuators is not going to be something that's just going to stack on a lot of damage in this situation. All it does is it helps clears those trash ads. That way, when you do have roaring flames times 3, you can be throwing it at the enemy you're actually trying to do damage with. I know there's better options here. Things like Worm God Caress, the stack here with roaring flames. I know, guys. This build is just out of design to allow you to clear multiple ads while simultaneously stacking roaring flames. Okay, guys, so the final build is Dunemarchers plus the Code of the Missile tree there on the Striker class. That is the new Striker subclass. Now, it comes with a lot of things here that are about to synergize well for you. Number 1, Ballistic Slam. You leap into the air and press your melee to then slam to the ground. Very similar, actually identical to Death from Above back in D1. But this is just a melee ability. It does not pack the punch that is super packs, and it does not one-hit kill people, except when paired with certain exotics. We're only going to talk about Dunemarchers today, and if you already know what I'm talking about, don't say it. You're going to ruin it for the rest of us. This is just for Dunemarchers, okay, guys? Now, the other perk here that's also synergizing, Impact Conversion. You gain super energy from hitting enemies with Ballistic Slam. So as you can see, obviously there's a lot of synergy happening here. Now, first up, the Ballistic Slam has a pretty good size AoE effect. It does 130 damage. Not enough to kill an opponent in one slam, but definitely impactful. A pretty good bit of damage. On top of that, it's actually pretty easy to get the jump on enemies. Not saying shoulder charge isn't, but since you're eye level with so many opponents, it's sometimes difficult to close the gap, especially with things like shotguns around. So this melee allows you to really get the jump on enemies. Now, as I said, it does 130 damage. Linear Actuators does 85. This is when stuff starts to get a little sketchy. Linear Actuators is a strange perk. Let's observe this clip again. I go in for the slam. Now, look, I want you to watch the names. Look at the Titan below us. He real G for life. He's got full health, full shield. He receives 130 damage, as well as the Hunter in front of me. However, the Hunter in front of me is what the game is recognizing as taking the melee damage. Because as you know, if you punch an enemy, Linear Actuators doesn't actually activate on that target. It's the surrounding targets. So in this situation, Linear Actuators will bounce off of that Hunter and hit the Titan real G for life behind me and finish him off. Because they both receive 130 damage. And that's a pretty big spread. You can see those guys, they've got some distance in between them. But I was still able to apply the melee damage to both of them. Linear Actuators just allows for it to bounce off of one of them and finish off the other. Now, I think in this clip, this guy in the back, the Titan, has to be somewhat half health or close to it, because it shows me hitting him with the melee charge and actually killing him with a melee. Then it shows his friend here, who was at full health, died because you've got the melee charge on top of Linear Actuators bouncing off the initial target and hitting him for that final 85. So my conclusion on this build, Dunemarchers with Code of the Missile, it's very good in 6v6. Matter of fact, it's disgusting in 6v6 because the more enemies you have, the more Linear Actuators will bounce from enemy to enemy, which can just result in you getting a team wipe. Now, in 1v1 scenarios, I would not recommend it, as when you go in for the Ballistic Slam, it's not going to throw any Linear Actuator damage on that single target. You're just going to do a base 130. You will charge him, but he doesn't have anything around him to discharge that static charge. So fellas, those are your Dunemarcher builds. I'm going to be breaking this down from exotic to exotic, and then eventually I'll group them together and say like a top 5 or top 10 Titan builds. Whatever the case, these are fun, like for real fun, and it gave me a different perspective on some of them. Like, I never would have thought to match Code of the Commander with Dunemarchers and linear actuators. It just never even struck me as being an option. So fellas, let me know in the comments below what you think of these builds. And if you got any nasty ones to recommend, I'm all ears. So fellas, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.
Mellow music.